G'day everyone, and for those who came in late, you're watching another one of Chronicle Chamber's video reviews. Today we're looking at the reference book From Sunbeams to Sunset. As you can see, the rise and the fall of the Australian comic book from 1924 through to 1965, and there's a mountain of information work done inside here by Graeme Cliffe. Supported, of course, by Nat Carmichael, President of the Australian Cartoonists Association, as well as representing comicoz.com, so check them out. As you can tell, it's going to be all about Australian comics. There's a map of Australia, lots of old comics that many of us would recognise or maybe not, and we're going to be introduced to them here. On the back, we've got a photo of the author with one of the many Australian historians and comic book creators that he spoke to for the making of this book. Now, with these hardcovers, one thing I always love to check out is the dust jacket. And what I like about this particular book is that the dust jacket does have a reveal. All of those books that are in shadow there are revealed. And what stands out straight away is that someone from the dust jacket, the Phantom, is not easily identified, and boom, suddenly there we are. And lots of these will be recognisable to people who've been following what Frew have done lately with their giant size books, and we're looking at the Raven, Sir Falcon, Catman is on there as well, the Shadow we've seen. So Panther was a folio, but not actually in a giant size yet, and a range of other ones. Phantom Cowboy must be on there, Phantom Ranger is on there as well. All right, as we go inside, straight away we see another potential reference to the Phantom with the Phantom Pirate. Great big inset, mask similar to our favourite characters, and an image from one of the books there. And this sort of speaks straight away to the imagery we're going to see inside. We just flick over. I love this, the fact that the book is dedicated to Peter Thomas Chapman. Peter Chapman, of course, did a number of Frew covers back in the day. We've talked to Kevin Patrick about him before, and we've read stuff about him in giant sizes before. And this almost is, it could almost be an ad for the modern day giant size and the work that Shane Foley in particular is doing, and Glenn Ford, of course. We've got the Shadow, we've got Sir Falcon and Phantom Ranger, of course. All right, I'm not going to go through page by page, but it's good to have a look at the contents page there to see what you're getting yourself in for. It's organised chronologically, as you can see, and even within the decades, has split up with titles created locally, so all of the variations here, things that were for comic book publication, locally created titles, comics based on overseas strips, and I'm sure you can understand that Frew Publications and the Phantom is going to fit loosely in amongst there. So it's not a heavily Phantom book, but it's very interesting in what they do show. So the contents is one thing, and I loved reading through the acknowledgements, was fantastic just to see all of those names that we're probably familiar with from the Phantom world. Peter Chapman, of course, who I've mentioned. Glenn Ford is in here. Glenn was, of course, on a number of, where are we, Glenn? Where you've hidden on me. Glenn Ford, there he is. He's publisher at Frew now, the owner and manager of Frew at the moment. Has appeared in a number of podcasts before, so if you want to check out Expand podcast number 121, number 85 or 33, you can hear from Glenn. Dudley Hogarth and Frew Publications is listed. Dudley's made a cameo in the most recent, one of the most recent podcasts in episode 123. Dietmar Lederwasch is in here as well, and he was a guest on podcast number 47. In fact, Dietmar took the photo that's at the back of the book there. Jeremy McPherson is listed, and he appeared on podcast number 27, and Kevin Patrick is another name that we'd be familiar with from podcast number 83. So if you haven't subscribed to Expand the Phantom podcast yet, make sure you go through and check that out. The introduction tells us a bit about what is considered to be an Australian comic book, and therefore within the scope of reference for this book, Frew Publications does get a mention right there on page 1. So we understand that Frew is going to be littered throughout this. We'll just have a quick look at the book as we skip through to the index, and you can see some of the books and that sort of thing. This references here, you get a bit of a feel for how the imagery is done. But if we skip through to the index, here we have all of the pages on Frew. So thank you, Antonio, for showing us, as you can see, the amount of information that Frew is going to contribute. And Glenn here is showing us all of the Phantom references. So not as much as you might think if you're looking at just the Phantom, not as many pages as you might think, but that's again because it's not an Australian created comic book within the terms, the time that this book is set. So what's interesting is the amount of other Phantom stuff there is, and we'll have a bit of a look at some of those as we go through as well. Also worth noting in terms of being a reference book, so we've got a 2-page glossary. The bibliography, believe it or not, is 28 pages long, all of the other works that this has referenced, which is unbelievable, as well as a bunch of the other appendices and the index, as I said, and even the end notes run to something like 7 pages. So very extensive reference book, and as you would expect from an encyclopedia or a high quality research tome, there's lots of words as well as some cool pictures. Now if we flip through, I've marked a couple of pages. So Jamie is showing us here the Phantom Commando, and I just thought that was interesting with the concept of the Phantom again and the mask. So that was there. What's Grange got for us here? The Super Yank comics, which are highly prized by collectors, and I don't know, hopefully we might see through reprise this one again, but it is very much in the realm of giant size, which they're doing, so possibly not. Every time I flip through this, I see something different, which is cool. The Panther I didn't even have marked, and as I said, we've seen that before in the Fru Universe with Salvaludo, his contribution to the Folio series. Now here we have. So I've got Shane showing us some of the giant size features, I guess. So Falcon, Catman, Planet Man we've seen there as well. Kid Champion was another book that was done by Fru, and it'd be interesting to see. It would be interesting to see some more of that, I suppose. The Shadow is the other one here, and we've got in the middle of all of that the information about Sir Falcon, Planet Man, Catman. Those are the big ones here, and they've come from, I guess, of course, Kid Champion, all of the Fruit, the Shadow. Yeah, so they're not listed by publisher, they're listed by a title, which is fair, and Fruit features heavily throughout those, obviously. Going back a little bit further, Paul is showing us the Phantom Commando, again, just a Phantom reference, or not really a Phantom reference, but perhaps inspired. And Jeremy has got some of the earlier examples of the Phantom with cover by Tommy Hughes, ? David, there's a question for you. I know that number 38 has well and truly gone through the file cards, and we've identified that. Some lovely, beautiful, big artwork, lots of information, particularly about all of the early stuff, and it's very, it's very matter of fact in the way that the information is presented. It's very much an encyclopedia. I used that word before, and I'll do it again. So Australian adventures, what are we back here into the 1940s? So a real step back in time. I felt a number of times, Glenn's got us here at the very first appearance of the Phantom in Australia, which was in 1938, and the Australian Women's Mirror there. So really fascinating, really fascinating for those of us who perhaps grew up reading comics and cartoons in their grandfather's reading room, as I did. I really enjoyed reading the information about Jaliff's Outback, for instance, which was a comic book that my granddad had stashed away in the toilet, and I read in there when he was visiting his place. Lots of really interesting information. It's not so much a Phantom collectible, I guess, unless depends on your own definition, I suppose, because it's so much more than the Phantom. The Phantom is sort of a thing that you can bookmark a few times, but it's really about the grand scope of Australian comics, and in that regard, Graeme Cliffe, you've created the absolute gold standard for, and definitive, that was probably the word I was really looking for, the definitive text on Australian comic books. The research that he's put into this is just outstanding, and there's nothing like it on the market. There's no other collection, and I would be surprised if Glenn and Dudley and every time they bring out a giant size, they're not referring back to this. Fantastic. I'm really pleased that I've picked it up. I'm going to enjoy dipping into this. I'm probably never going to read it cover to cover, but you never would with an encyclopedia. It's the sort of thing you can dip into. And when we hear from people like Peter Kingston, who we've spoken to on the podcast before, you know, an older Australian fan, he loved Buffhead, and a lot of the artwork in the Phantom art gallery had elements of Buffhead in it, and so I'd absolutely be looking that up and finding out more information. So that's just an example of one. Really encourage you, if this is the sort of thing you're interested in, to go and grab it. If you're a completist, of course you're going to want it because of the Phantom references, but otherwise it's just something that's going to be really cool to have on the bookshelf and be able to refer to. All right, thanks very much once again for tuning into this video of a video review from Chronicle Chamber. Make sure you hit the like button below. I hear that's what people say on YouTube videos. Subscribe to the channel, all of that sort of good stuff. Otherwise, of course, just check out chroniclechamber.com for all of the latest in Phantom news and information from around the world. All right, thanks very much, folks. Good night. Happy Phantoming.